changes have been happening. And in fact, I think we are very, very lucky in Singapore to have a large amount of investment being put into early childhood. So I wanted to kind of like frame it that our tree is growing, our early childhood tree is growing. But at the same time, in our conversations, and all three of us are actually mentors for the Principal Matters group, and we engage in a lot of, our own discussions, we realize that even though the tree is growing, the root must grow faster. A lot of things are happening, but because we are mainly operationally situated and we are concerned with the operations of the sector, we may also lose sight of the direction that we are going. So change naturally will naturally bring along a lot of challenges, and I think from the practitioners over here, you all know the challenge is every day. The pace of change, really, from the 1999 onwards, we could see a real rapid pace building up. This is 1999 to 2009. This is 10 years, right? This is the key ones. This is 2010 to, now, 2019. This is the next 10 years. So you can just see how fast and how rapid the changes have been. And this has been a big challenge for a lot of our teachers as well as our leaders. And I think it's tightened up and it's defined very clearly our targets, which have been defined in a sense by accessibility, affordability, and quality. This is the third bit, which is the quality element, is one of the most difficult. It's one of the most elusive. This is not something that top-down, it can be done, but it can be done faster if it's ground up. There are a lot of things happening in terms of government policy, legislation. This is usually where, this is our kind of, where we often operate. But aside from that, there is also a lot of changes happening in terms of the global trends. And this is also a point of consideration for our practitioners. Because people in the workforce, usually we don't tend to want to deal with policy. But in reality, policy is what defines. The trends are what defines. But there is also another element we have not harnessed. It's anticipating the changes. Because these changes are, it's there for all to see, but there's very little discussion. There's very little engagement about it. We do very well, but we need to also think about what we do. This is the thing about the two studies. It all revolves around quality, which is the third thrust that we were talking about. And if we don't address that element, this is you can put all the money in the world, but at the end of the day, it will still be unattainable. So quality is a global issue. There's something that we need to think about in terms of how people respond to change. And if you notice this, the first, it will always be about shock, denial, frustration, before you enter into that depression. And then after that, where you basically get a little bit more positive and you go on the upswing. But what happens when the change is so frequent? That valley of despair, I think, will be an abyss. And it overlays and overlays. And this is a real problem. It's a human element. I think our teachers and our leaders are trying to cope. But it is difficult sometimes when change is coming. So what can we do as a community? We tend to be very operational in the centres. But what we've also realized in our own interactions is that having more informal, professional conversations would actually be something worthwhile to explore. What we're talking about is engaging them to think about issues. I have listed a few ideas, protocols, which we as mentors actually learned for ourselves when we visited other countries. We know what we are supposed to do, but unfortunately, we may not know how to do it. And sometimes it's tools and little strategies give a real clear idea on what leaders or teachers or how conversations can take place in your center.
I know we're well known for efficiency, excellence, and that goes into our early childhood sector. We want to do. But this breathlessness has a downside. And we have much to be proud of. I don't want to knock it. But it's also a tension. You can't hurry childhood. And there are some children who just need time. And by the way, there are some educators who also need time. But how do you find yourself in the midst of all these challenges, yet do what you believe should be done, and not lose yourself in it? Head, heart, hands. It's a whole package. And early childhood is about all three. The doing without the heart does not develop children in a positive way. And the doing without the head is not deep. For my leaders in my center, we set aside dedicated time to pull apart, to come together and not discuss operations, curriculum. Many early childhood leaders in Singapore really are managers, carrying out lots of tasks. And leaders do need to carry out these tasks. But if you only carry out these tasks and think you're a leader, then they're very much mistaken. And I challenge all of you, challenge in a very positive way, when you're in organizations that have certain practices, it's always good to revisit. And sometimes we might find ourselves looking at each other, yeah, why? Then it's good for us to rethink. Maybe it was done for a certain season, a certain period, years ago, but maybe things have changed. But let me tell you, I have enough confidence in some of the people in our government that if you talk to the right people and you explain to them in a certain way, they can understand. But you need to speak to the people who have the authority to say, yes, that makes sense. I worry because more and more organizations, early childhood organizations, are large ones now. If we're not careful, we're going to have an early childhood workforce that just follows instructions. In the end, my question is, what are your convictions? When the day we have teachers who just do as they're told is when we will have children who also will do as they're told and don't ask questions. So how leaders treat their staff, how staff treat the children, this is going to spill into society. We've got to be a thinking society. So my pitch is for the need for thinking leadership with head, heart, and hands. Because this has a huge impact on children. And I think it's very important that we not just focus on regulations, but on principles. If we understand broad principles, it will guide us, and we're able to navigate the slightly uncomfortable areas because the principle will stand us in good stead. You're allowed to make mistakes, right? It's not a crime to make mistakes. And as a principal, I allow you to make mistakes so that you will allow your teachers to make mistakes. And so they will allow the children to make mistakes. It's okay. That's what education is about. And to be able to come to terms with not knowing and being a little uncertain is not a bad thing. And in the end, shaping a culture of learning. And if we can do that in our classrooms, in our schools, in our learning institutions, in our families, a culture of learning, I think we would be a much richer society.
Quality is something that that's in our hands. That's something that we can actually do something about. And it has been said that, for myself, I believe a lot in developing people. So like Jack, we're here to grow people so that they grow others. In every challenge, in every crisis, there are opportunities. It's a question of how we see it. To give a bit of background information, we are SME. We are not backed by huge resources. We are really from our own pocket, so everything matters. When the challenges that the industry was faced with, it definitely hit us hard. For example, when the growth was so rapid, teachers were in high demand. What happens? Of course, we are shaken as well. This is what we're faced with in the industry. Similarly, like Jack, we actually saw it as a heart, a head, and a hand. I'm more a heart person. And I believe very, very much in purpose and intentions. If you do not know what you're doing, you're just blindly doing it. And we actually went out to find what drives us, what is it? we talk about personal whys, we talk about a tribal why, and this is very much along the line of Simon Sinek, you know, finding your why. What is your group goal? What is it that you stand for? Finding our why, sharing the stories, connecting to what truly matters. What was that purpose? What did it result to? It's really about this clarity, this simple clarity. It's a very simple exercise that made us realize why we're in this industry, and it really helped. So then the next thing that we wanted to know was how. We know why we're doing what we're doing, but how are we going to do it? That's where the head comes in. What guides us? It's a very basic formula. With this, we know how we are going to carry ourselves. We know how we are going to make decisions. How do we actually engage each other? How do we actually motivate each other? So what do we do for the hands? How do we actually actualize that? This is to put it into action, right? And we came to a shared leadership model because these teachers have been with us for years. They've been with us for 8, 10, 12 years. They all understand the works, the ins and outs of our organization, what needs to be done. From my perspective, it was really to empower them and to let go and say, yes, let them take the lead, decentralize them, the decision. So we had to create the space. We had to give them that avenue to decide things, to run the school the way that they should. We removed the fear of making mistake. We removed that fear of failing. So what, you failed? Never mind. We do it again. Next round, we learn something from it. This was actually drawn from the exercise when we had our tribal why. The moment you enter every one of our premise, we will actually see this. And to remind each other, to inspire each other, to be real, to be able to know that this is what we are here for. As a community, we also need to know our why. Why are we pushing for quality? Why are we doing what we are doing? Why are we serving this sector? How do we push each other? How do we have this sessions where we can come together and to be able to ask ourselves what's next? Where do we go on? And how can we be a voice? How can we be that change that is needed in the industry?
You need to ascertain what is the leadership. What are the beliefs of leadership? And I think from the Principal Matters program, what we've learned is you have to give that space to understand that leadership can be very different and that at different points, you need to exercise a different type of leadership. So to evaluate it and put it into a formula, I think it would be quite unfair for the leaders in that sense.
This area of, how do we ascertain quality leadership in Singapore is something pertinent for us to talk about because it's an emerging area. Never before have we had so many leaders in early childhood in Singapore because we're opening more and more centres all the time.
Skill standards are there. There are all these technical know-hows to tell you the expectations, what you're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, it's your heart, your head and your hand. So it still goes back to that.
Having these conversations ideally should be a way of life. So it's always an invitation to bring people into it, but different individuals also have different points of readiness. And conversations have to be held for there to be quality. If not, we're just downloading information, and that is not the way to develop leaders. For sustainability, longevity, I have to develop the next generation. So I am a very happy person today that all the centres are run in St. James Church Kindergarten are run by the second generation leaders, But it didn't happen by accident. I walked with them. I journeyed with them, I talked with them, and it wasn't just formal. There were many, many informal engagement, but it was a meeting of minds, of heart. It was an accumulation of a life that was shared. And really, this is what mentoring is all about. Informal mentoring, because formal mentoring has an end.
Leaders are organically nurtured. So over the course of the years, we have programs where we invite people in and we have got different types of conversations, workshops. We we make it very casual, but it also gives the young leaders or the potential leaders an opportunity to see what leadership is all about.
The mentoring is a relationship that builds over time. But coaching is a much more specific, it's much more targeted, but it's also, it allows the person to address the issues from that person's point of view. So that's another way in which new leaders and old leaders, regardless of the however season, anybody can actually benefit from coaching.